BookBlast podcast and the first of 15 podcasts in our new international podcast series, Bridging the Divide, Translation and the Art of Empathy. We are showcasing a selection of the best writing in translation from around the world being published this year in the UK by 10 leading independent houses, along with a trailblazing publisher specialising in translation. Today I'm interviewing Margot van der Straten, known as J.S.Margot, the author of Mazel Tov, published by Pushkin Press, which publishes novels, essays, memoirs and children's books from timeless classics to the urgent and contemporary. Thank you, Margot, for coming to be interviewed. So you were born and grew up in Belgium. Were your family big readers?
In our home, I think the only books were dictionaries. Mm-hmm. My parents motivated the 3 children to go to the library as much as possible. From the 3 children, I was the one that was mostly obsessed by reading. So I was a member of all the libraries of the small village we lived in, and I think I did read 5 books a week. I read everything, but I think it's not so easy to say the titles because not all of them were translated into English. So there is a lot of Dutch literature that I did read.
What languages were spoken at home? Because you are a multilingual lady. Yes, and how was that reflected in your reading?
The language is Dutch, but Flemish. I mean, it's like Canadian English and English and American English. So Dutch is, in fact, the same language as Flemish is, but with some local differences. Of course, the village where I live is close to Wallonie, which is the French part of Belgium. So if you would take the bus or the train, 25 minutes further, there was a French-speaking part of Belgium. So there was always that connection of the French with the Belgian, with the Flemish. But at home, we spoke Flemish.
Yeah. So, because you attended the Higher Institute of Interpreting and Translation Studies in Antwerp to become a French-Spanish translator. So that was motivated by what in particular, or was it?
My mother was a teacher in a school, a primary school, and the school, the children in the school were all minors' children, so all children from migrants. We were, I think, I have the list of when I was 6 years old of my class. I asked it because maybe once I will write a book about this. From the 30 children in my class when I was 6, only 7 were Flemish. All the rest were Turkish, Greek, Polish, Spanish, Italian, Moroccan, and so on. So the polyglot in my house, my home, was only my parents, but the biotope, my habitat where I was growing, where I was during the day, was very polyglot, not only in speaking, because
so
all these it was the
open to
yes, and it made me it wasn't strange for me to be in a community where I heard languages I didn't understand. I tasted dishes that I didn't know at school. You know, all the customs from other cultures were there. I think that was very important, really,
for children to have
because I was a child,
to be open to all of that, and it's an experiment. And
yes,
try to
and I'm talking about the 70s.
So you, because as a translator recreates the world of the writer in language. So you became a writer yourself. So how has being both a writer and a translator, how have they kind of helped each other, been beneficial to each other? Because you and again then leading from the polyglot even more, entering other worlds and mindscapes.
Yes,
if you like.
I think when you translate, you do not only translate the world, you also enter into the culture of the people speaking or using or writing that language. I started writing because, and that's interesting for me, because translating for me it was too I had to obey the pen of the other one, and I really had the feeling that I wanted to rewrite the original text. Of course, that was the beginning of my own pen. You know, you also, I didn't. Maybe I always knew I wanted to write, but it's all together, you know. It's
also, you're a journalist, though. I mean, it's essential training for a would-be writer as well. Because
yes, it helps you to look at the world differently. It opens your eyes. It opens your eyes to language as well. But I think observation is maybe one of the most important skills of a good journalist.
Your memoir, Mazel Tov, published by Pushkin Press, describes your student years when you tutored the two youngest children, Elzira and Yaakov, of the Schneider family in Antwerp. What does Mazel Tov mean?
Mazel Tov is Hebrew for good luck. I hope you're well. So it's a very positive word.
There were, before you, 6 student tutors who didn't last the course at all. They all left and it didn't work. So it's interesting, you clicked. You not only actually did you click, in the end you became a great family friend. And this, what is interesting is that they were modern Orthodox Jewish family living in the Jewish neighbourhood of Antwerp, and though they're modern Orthodox and not Haredim or ultra Orthodox, you very much follow observance of Jewish law based on received precedent through the ages. So, because as a Belgian Catholic, did you know anything about Judaism and modern Orthodox and all of that before?
Nothing at all.
Completely new to you.
Nothing. I didn't know anything about Judaism. Only the only thing what we learn about it is that it's a monotheistic religion in school. That's what you learn. And for the rest, I think in secondary school, the Holocaust, the history part. But I never met and I never talked to a very religious Jew. And my Schneider family is a modern Orthodox family, very religious.
So what is, but that is just something, because Orthodox, I mean, that is a thing in your book. One gets a very real feel of many, many different levels and layers of what is Orthodox, what is Jewish, what are the key between being a modern Orthodox and not an ultra-Orthodox, but still very Orthodox? I mean, what are the key differences?
It's hard to explain it very quickly, but of course there is a huge there is a huge difference. Modern Orthodox, like the term explains itself, is modern and Orthodox in the same life. It's very difficult because it's very hard to live following the Torah and the Talmud, the religious book.
So like when it was written, essentially, as though you were still
2,000 years ago.
Yes, right, okay.
And at the same time they embrace modern life. At the same time they have regular jobs as much as possible. But the ultra-Orthodox, they dedicate their lives mostly to religion, and they have rabbis, which is a rabbi. A rabbi is different from an intellectual rabbi. A rabbi is a more spiritual leader. So the ultra-Orthodox have a more spiritual way of filling in the Judaism. And it's a recent movement, the Haredim and the Hasidim. It's coming from the 18th century, while Judaism, the Orthodox, it's for thousands of years ago.
Ancient. So can you describe a day in the life of the Schneider family when you were, of course you were teaching, so you would go after the children went to school and you were studying, so you would go, but then
I think yes, but what I noticed from the beginning already, from my first visit when I had the job application, I noticed that every aspect of daily life is influenced by their religion, is influenced by the rules. So there are 613 Orthodox rules, and they try to live by it. So it starts with touching the mezuzah, the small tube in the doorpost, so they touch it up. So
because you said that there's that whole thing about not shaking the hand. When
not shaking the hand,
not supposed to shake the man, does not shake the woman's hand.
He accepted my hand, but he asked me if I was ready to not do it anymore.
Customs and traditions to do with clothes, kosher cuisine, schooling, segregation between the sexes. The importance of the matchmaker when arranging a marriage. One gets all of that through various anecdotes, and a portrait, sort of mosaic, is built up. So, for example, clothes, to what extent did they wear the mandatory dark coats and long skirts? And did men and women, did they go walking up and down the street together or not?
With the modern Orthodox, yes.
It's okay to walk on the street
yes,
together.
and even when you're married, you can walk together, of course. But I remember the first day I was there that the two girls of the family, for example, they all had long sleeves. Their skirt was buttoned up till the neck. All these, I never ever saw the skin of the legs of Alcira. I was there from her 12-year-old till she was 18. I never ever saw the skin because she's always still wearing tights, woolen panties. But so it's all little by little. It's the observation again. I observed all the strange. For me, it were odd customs as well. The fact that on Friday evening you were not allowed to use the elevator, not allowed to ring the door, not allowed to start, not to start, nor to stop the electrical circuit, because everything has to stay. The world has to stay as the world is. That's the basic of Shabbat, and you concentrate on your family, on your. But for me, it's of course it's strange. Even taking a bag from a roll of paper bags. Tearing it apart. It's not allowed. Okay. You have to ask a goy, a non-Jew, to do it for you. So all these, little by little, I was introduced by it, but it took time. And you asked me why I stayed with them and the other ones didn't. I think because I needed the money. That's one of the economical reasons. But I was intrigued by it. Yeah. I mean, when it's difficult, I like it.
Well, maybe I wonder how much again you had grown up in an atmosphere where you were used to.
I think that must be that's. That's it.
And you were true to yourself, but you were just yourself, because that comes out in the book. You, of course, you want blunders and make mistakes, and you were like, but you didn't try and cover up or you were just authentically yourself. Really.
Yes, and sometimes very critical too, because, for example, the arranged marriage it's still for me
at the end,
something that is difficult to accept. But even when you see that it's okay and that it's a happy marriage and it's still.
Well, she was allowed choice. I mean, that is interesting.
Yes, of course.
Arranged marriage,
proposed marriage we have to use.
Really. It's more that and the first person, it didn't work out, though she liked him.
Yes.
So it's interesting that there is a flexibility there, whereas one perhaps.
But still, there is no room for romance. First, it's
got to be arranged by the matchmaker.
Yeah.
But so through various incidents, we discover, so as I said, a life. So that's the thing. It's really the inside a family. You really get an amazing inside view.
And because Judaism is about organizing your daily life, it's a religious book without mentioning the books. In fact, I don't use psalms or whatever. There is no verse of the Torah in my book. No. But it's all about religion. It's strange.
And because the children, Elzira suffered from dyspraxia and had a weak hand. So there's a wonderful description when she's learning. She's given a pink bicycle, and you help teach her. You go off out of sight into another neighbourhood,
completely different neighbourhood,
so that she can learn how to ride and fall off without because that is just not. You cannot be seen falling off a bicycle. Her learning. How to ride a bike.
Yes, and it was.
And you went off into. She'd never been out of her neighbourhood. I mean, it's extraordinary that she was. How old when she was learning?
12.
And she'd never been out of her neighbourhood.
And she had tried to learn to ride the bike, but because of the dyspraxia, it wasn't possible. It's very hard.
But also, it wasn't right to fall off, was it? To just throw your legs in the air because you've fallen off.
At the age of 12, yes, it's not something you do in the Jewish neighborhood. And it took me a while to convince her parents to let me do so. So I took her to a completely other neighborhood. We walked, and it was for the first time in her life that she walked without a Jewish person next to her to the other part of the city. And it's not far. I'm talking about maybe 1 kilometer or 1.5 kilometers. It's nothing. But it is a huge step. It was for her, and the cycling went well. She, of course, she fell, but got up, and she's a stubborn. She still is. At that time, a girl, now a woman. But she really wanted to, because she I think she knew that if she was able to make this step, all the rest would get easier, and it was true.
It gave her confidence.
It took her time, but it gave her confidence, and it also gave the family, especially the father, maybe even more the mother, confidence in me, because I had managed to do something, to change something in the life of the girl that was very important for the whole family.
Lovely.
That was a very lovely moment. It is true.
Yes, there is that.
It
You
is
describe
true.
the moment when he says that you're like her team, the sort of team
yes.
rooting for her.
Yeah. It is lovely when you can, when these things happen, and they allowed me to happen this as well.
So
It's not only one way.
Very sweet little dachshund called Monsieur appears on the scene. So let's hear about Monsieur. Her little dachshund.
It's not so common to have a dog
Is
in
it allowed? It's clean. Is it allowed? Because some religions don't like animals, and some do.
There are no proofs that it's not clean or whatever. So, but most of the Orthodox, modern Orthodox, you will find families, but ultra Orthodox never. But it has more to do with the practical side of kosher and non-kosher, with the food in the house and so on. But also this dachshund was an initiative from the father again, who saw that his daughter with the dyspraxia and with the self-confidence could have an extra help. So he opened this way again also for her. But it gave her and us the opportunity to walk in the city and to open up.
Antwerp has been a focus of the diamond trade since the 15th century, and diamonds were Mr. Schneider's business. His office was rather ratty and run down, and they lived in a rather wonderful mansion with video intercoms and plush carpets. So,
in the 90s, when I was teaching there, it was the most important economical sector for all the Jews living in Antwerp, not only as a trade, but also as all these workers, diamond workers. But this has all changed through the years. Nowadays, it is the low-cost countries who are taking over all this, which means that the middle-class Jews are having difficulties.
The 4 children, they end up studying or working in Israel. None of them end up in the jewellery trade, though one of them marries. Is it Simon who marries a young woman in New York whose father in New York is a jeweller?
Jacob's wife is
there's Jacob's
wife,
not
Simon is in...
No, so Jacob's wife, she comes from a jeweller family in New York.
Yes.
So there's a big community. But it's interesting, none of the children go into the diamond jewellery trade like the father, which you might have expected it might have passed on. I mean,
it has really fallen down.
65% of Antwerp's officially registered Jewish population was deported by rail to concentration extermination camps. Of those thousands, the vast majority never came back. After 1945, most of those Jewish children who survived the war hiding had lost a parent or been orphaned, and you say it is likely Mr. Schneider belonged to that group because his mother survived Auschwitz.
Yes.
So, but despite the horror and the trauma, they went back to their old homes. How can one comprehend that? You asked that question. How
yes,
they went
because
back,
for me it's very hard to comprehend this, because even
did he ever talk about?
Silence was the most easiest way for them, and easy is not the right word, to deal with this. But for example, I remember inside the family, not only the Schneiders, but also from the friends, this whole generation of their parents is brought up without parents, more or less. So the question, mommy, daddy, what is a grandmother? What is a grandfather? They didn't know, because all the grandmothers and grandfathers were just never came back from Auschwitz-Birkenau most of the time. So,
though, have grandmother Pappenheim who survived Auschwitz, but on the other hand, for you, what effect did it have on you to actually meet and talk with a survivor of the camps all the same? One wouldn't bring it up per se, though there is an incident in the book when it comes up. How did it affect you and your ways of seeing the whole Holocaust, or what kind of effect did it have on you, really?
At that time, I was in my 20s, and I didn't have the subtlety to not talk about it. I was intrigued by, of course, by the grandmother as well, but also I was curious to know how the war had been for them. Because my grandfather was always talking about the World War II. And I thought, really, not reflecting enough, that, of course, when you see an older person that survived the war, you just try to talk about it, because it will be, it's good to talk to. So, and of course, she very quickly made it clear to me that she wasn't going to talk about it, and that it was...
But you sensed she was tough. She had a steely resilience.
If I see when I talk about her, I can see her. She was frail. She was very.
She was strong,
but she was like a volcano. I don't know. She was. You could see that she was fragile, but at the same time she was fire. She was. I was intrigued by her. I think from all the people I met in my life, she is one of the I will never ever forget. And it's not only because I knew she survived Auschwitz. Of course, it's strange when you, as a 20-year-old non-Jew, you just sit on the table next to someone. You want to see the number on the hand, or on the arm, all these. But it's a kind of it's admiration, but at the same time you are admiration is not the right word. Intimidated by the strength of that woman. That was so clever. Mr. Schneider has he did tell me small parts of how his mother survived in the camps. That she was so clever that they know you, but at the same time they don't know you. You know, I don't know how it's translated to that part.
Because then his wife, though, her parents were not, they disappeared in the camps. His wife, who you always described as being rather aristocratic and rather dignified, and she had this great dignity.
Yes.
Her parents were nowhere to be seen. They had died in the camps.
And the silence was always. Yeah. The strange thing is, after my book has been published, I'm still in contact with this family.
Yes.
And one of the, I think half year after the Dutch publication, the first publication, I saw them again in Antwerp, and at that time they opened up more. It's strange. So you can see that still that all the steps of confidence are never finished.
No,
because it's because they read the book and they knew about the book that they opened up, and I never ever heard anything about her family when I was during all these years, and only now human relationships are intriguing if you just do the effort to keep on.
Oh yes. So at the time, your boyfriend, when you were working for the Schneiders, actually was a political refugee from Iran, though he wasn't a practicing Muslim, and he was a supporter of the Palestinian cause. So it's interesting you were working for the Schneiders, and I mean, did they ever talk to you about their views on the whole Palestinian-Israel? Did you ever sense anything from them about it?
I was a very lefty at that time. One day I came with a newspaper from an extreme left newspaper, and at that time Yasser Arafat was on the cover of the newspaper, and Mr. Schneider did see it, and at that time he really asked me apart, and we had a discussion about, or a discussion more or less, about that I was not supposed to deal with these issues with the children, and that when it had to come up to politics and Israel politics, it was something he wanted to be part of it. It was not to me. Afterwards, when they were adults, and nowadays we talk about it. Yeah. But when I was at that time, I was not allowed. I think not allowed. I was not supposed to do so. They wouldn't appreciate it. And I think Yaakov, the son, he was, when I was going to talk about this issue with him, he would surely go and tell his parents. I brought it up.
Later, when they were all studying in Israel, and you were in San Francisco, anyway, Cuba, and you went traveling yourself.
Cuba,
then the letters, you discovered that her
Yeah,
letters,
everything,
the daughter's
yes.
letters to you. All
I
your
was
correspondence
shocked.
had been read by the family.
Yes, openly. It's
Yeah,
I never. So it's just, these are strange things, and
Because it's true letters are very private, so normally
yes, in
so
our and also it's a family thing. It depends from family to family. Even in the Jews, it's not at all. But in this family, the letters I wrote to Elzira were letters that the parents did read, and she showed them too. So it was but for me, it was shocking.
Because over and beyond your relationship with them and with the whole family, you also, in the book, you have friends from the Middle East, Turkey and Morocco. Nima's mother sends him food, so you get parcels from back home in Tehran every few months. Yes. Then his sister, though, Marjane, made no friends, had a breakdown and had to be sent home to psychiatric hospital.
Yes.
And you write, first-generation immigrant children weren't expected to continue their education after school. The idea didn't even occur to anyone, least of all their parents. Life in exile is very tough. There's a feeling of loss there. There's a feeling it's hopeless. So all the different communities. So you get the feeling of all the different communities protect themselves from the threatening other by creating barriers. So in the end, is the whole idea of diversity and everyone living happily side by side a sort of lovely political fantasy and completely unrealistic. I mean, it's quite you portray a very shifting portrait of how
it's difficult and
they're isolated in their communities, yet they sort of communicate, and yet they're educated, but nothing much is expected. So one feels that the sort of so-called quote unquote immigrant communities are not really, they're kind of accepted, but
I don't know, but what you say about the education and the third generation, that's more about the coal miners' children. At the time the coal miners came, they wanted to just for a certain moment and then go back to they had the intention and they wouldn't settle, and that's one of the reasons they were reluctant to learn the language from the new country and reluctant to send the children to a high school. It was better to just have a technical job, because then if you are a painter, you can paint in Morocco, or if you are a baker, you can bake in Morocco instead of going to university. The political refugees do completely the opposite. They really invest in studying, and then they have to stay. They're not going back. But I think it's true that about when we talk about multiculturalism, it's an interesting question. I don't have the answer, but when you see how minorities tried to stick on their own tradition, and I think it's very positive too, because you cannot lose your terroir, your roots. But we need bridges. So you can have, it's an archipelago. It's an archipelago. I don't know in English the archipelago.
Archipelago.
So with small, but the bridge it's essential, and the bridge has to go both ways. So
this book is a bridge, really. One could say this book is a bridge, and the art of translation is a bridge, because you are bridging worlds.
I think storytelling is a bridge in general. Every library is a bridge, because what is it? It's about stories about people you don't know. It's about reading lives you don't know, feeling things, being confronted to things you don't know. That's all bridges.
Because also in the 19th century, even within, say, Catholic communities or Protestant communities, there were a lot of traditions that have been lost now with modernity. So in a sense, these communities have hung on to them. Reading the book, one got a very strong feeling. There used to be far stronger traditions to do with how you greeted travellers or
social connection.
There were social manners and mores, and always in the churches, the women, or you always had your hair covered and things. And a lot of that's been lost. Whereas in a way, some of these more traditional communities, perhaps they're still they're showing us far more communities were like that. So they're not. Perhaps it sticks out more now, but it's not actually so unusual, really, if you think about it.
No, that's true, and that's what I show.
You show that actually.
And I realized that writing the book too. It's not something I knew before I was going to write the book. It's something you realize when you write the book. That of course I'm an atheist, and I'm a convinced atheist. I don't want a religious world anymore. But at the same time, you have to admit that we did lose many things that made society more connected, that made people more connected to each other, that made the interhuman relationship stronger. We are in a vacuum, and we have to
because that's what's odd, because globalism and diversity and the shifting cultural landscape are kind of a threat to tradition. There's a very paradoxical thing. It's interesting that we see how Judaism is very varied and multifaceted, and that a homogeneous Jewish community per se does not exist. And we see that it's very cosmopolitan and adaptable, yet that it also has its own schools, synagogues and traditions. It sort of seems there's a sort of balance between being very traditional and local, yet also very outward-looking. How much is that being lost?
They keep it going,
wherever they are, it doesn't matter. You keep it going.
Yes, and that's one of the strengths of this community. It's a paradox, like you say. But the whole life is a paradox. We are born and we die. That's the paradox already. So, but of course, this is very strange. When I told you, Elzira, when I walked with her through the neighborhood where she had never been before, outside the Jewish quarter, but at the same time, this girl, protected with her protected education, with a protected family, marries with someone from New York and has a very social life in New York 1 year after her marriage. So it is. But it gives
a structure. It's good. It's a structure. It is. Belonging roots is because in a way to be too rootless and have no.
That's why I decided
no customs or tradition or anything and be completely assimilated.
Yes.
I mean that is a very interesting paradoxical.
Yes, and that's why I finally decided to add Marianne, the sister of Nima. I didn't know in the beginning if I was going to add this her life too in the book, but of course it is a nice mirror because she was alone. She couldn't.
She made no friends.
No, it was the beginning of the political refugees from Iran. So there was not. Now you have Iranian communities
tragic the way she's kind of.
But if she had been a Jew, it would never ever have happened. Never ever, really. I'm sure.
Yes.
So that's
because
why
I find her in the bathroom with pictures of Cindy
it still makes me.
I don't. She's all covered in lipstick and trying.
Yes,
to be like
and she's still broken.
Image,
she never came again. She never. She's in Iran. She's in Tehran now. Of course, she's well, but she's never the same again than she was before all these things happened. No, she's broken for her life. But she's doing much better than she did here in Brussels. But that was one really. I in the beginning, and even my publisher thought it was not necessary to add this in the book. But
how tough it is.
I needed
exile is tough. Yes, because you do actually in the book some very nasty racist incidents feature. For example, the Milena, the girlfriend of a fellow student working in an expensive boutique, expresses racist opinions about all the rich Jewesses who shop there. And then there's the anecdote about Mayor Krabeck, who calls out some Orthodox Jews crossing the square that it was a shame the Germans hadn't put more of their kind in the gas ovens. Because you write about how at some point in the book when the extreme right get into power.
Yes,
I mean, how is that panning out?
I think anti-Semitism isn't less than it was at that time, but it has maybe a different face because it changes. It's in the book also. It's an always changing virus, and it's a bit like the coronavirus. And but really, it's there. It's coming from the radical Islam, from the political Islam. I mean, but it's also coming from the very right, extreme right.
Well, it's all politics at the extremes and politics of fear, isn't it?
Yes, and of course, and when you don't know fear, and it's you have whole libraries written about where anti-Semitism is coming from. We don't know where it's coming from. Where is racism coming from? Yes, but it has always to do with minorities versus majorities. And when the life of the majority is in an economical crisis, there is always a black sheep.
You write that you envy the way that Jacob and his people settle into new places, and that they, wherever they are, that beyond the country of their birth, there are social, religious, and professional networks. So that is a great strength.
It's a huge strength.
Yeah,
yes,
it's a huge strength.
Yes, of course. I would love to go to New York now and just live there for 2-3 years in a community that feels like home.
Antwerp is obviously a very cosmopolitan.
Yes, it's yes.
It's a big cosmopolitan.
Yeah. We also have
so
Chinese. Yeah.
And you were saying the Iranian community, there's more of a community.
Oh yes,
now
it's and they are strong, and they are They have a very strong network in all levels of society. This has changed in the last years. Yes.
So your translator is Jane Hadley Prohl. How did you meet?
The Flanders House of Literature invites translators in a small flat in Antwerp for centuries already. And Jane Hadley Prohl has always stayed there for several months. Yes. And this flat is in the middle of the Jewish district. So she knew but she knew all from outside, the facade from the Jewish life, but she never had an inside view. For me, my life in Antwerp has changed since the book as well, because the Jewish community has opened up to me. Even the ultra-Orthodox, not all of them, but some really...
You describe the very ultra-Orthodox when you go to Israel.
Yes.
Tel Aviv, amazing.
That's
great.
Yeah.
Describe that, why you go there, who you visit.
Yes, I go to Bnei Brak. I go, yes, and Bnei Brak is a small ultra-Orthodox city above in the north of Tel Aviv. For me, it's shocking.
There's a segregation on the bus.
Yes, it's really women apart, men apart. I don't know. For me, it still feels suffocating in my research for my book, because my memory was from 30 years ago, researching the book and wanting to write Mazel Tov 30 years later or 25 years later. I found that it was necessary to go back to Bnei Brak. So I went back to Bnei Brak 5 years ago before writing my book in Dutch, and it was even more ultra-Orthodox than my memory by then. So, but it's even for Israel, this is very exceptional. But because in general Israel is not religious, it's a liberal country. It's Jewish, but it's cultural Jewish. In this time, in the 90s, the two sons of the Schneiders were there for 1 or 2 years in the yeshiva, because the parents, they wanted the children the boys then, to get to know to get to know the most religious side, part of Judaism. But of course, the Schneiders didn't want the boys to become ultra-Orthodox, but just to have a taste of the spirituality that is over there. And that's something I wanted to say before. Elzira and even Yaakov, the way they educate their children, and they are more religious than the parents. Yes, they become. So even that's what you said. Even is it gone? Did it erode? No, not at all. It has become stronger, and I think one of the reasons why it became stronger is because modern life is everywhere now. All of them have a smartphone.
So it's a sort of in a way.
Everything from modern life can be in your pockets. Even if you close the internet connection at home, which you can, but it's not possible because Wi-Fi is everywhere. If you have children of 14, that is happening right now. It's interesting sociologically.
That is an consequence that actually the opening up and globalism is actually making creating a new tribalism.
Yes. So for example, I was scared of what the Jewish community would say, or how they would look at my book. Before the book was published, I wanted everything that had to do with the religion part of the book, with the modern Orthodoxy, to be 100% correct. Yeah. But I didn't know any Jewish person who could read this to me or who could correct this to me. So I went to all the Jewish doctors that I knew in Antwerp, and in the cabinet of the doctors, I would tell them my second agenda, that I was looking for someone who could just read my book and correct it on everything that had to do with the Orthodox. And one of these doctors has helped me very consciously, and he said, and then I felt comfortable myself. He said, there is not one drop of anti-Semitism in your book. You are very critical sometimes. You are, but the love for the family and for the other human being is so big that and that's okay. It's a strange balance, and it's an unconscious balance. For example, in Poland, it is a huge success, which is very strange, because that's the country where all the concentration camps and when the family Schneider, the parents heard that the book was published in Poland, in the country where they lost many family members, they were very moved by it.
So that's amazing. There's almost a healing element to it. It almost is opening up.
And and the healing moment, I think...
And read and discover, because ignorance is all we know. Ignorance breeds. Ignorance is important in the breeding of racism. If you're unaware and ignorant.
Ignorance, and also I think you have to know that it's never going to be everything is fine. It's not pink outside.
Yes, sure is.
I mean, it's it's part of it. Struggle is part of life. Imperfection is part of life. And of course sometimes it's a clash. It's a big clash. But even then you just get up again and you learn from your mistakes. You learn from what happened. It's not always a mistake. You learn from the clash as well.
Now, humour. There's quite a bit of humour in the book. Some dark humour, mistakes, but also just funny incidents. Aaron Schneider, he loves telling jokes. So I was wondering, could you read? This is a wonderfully indicative or exemplary joke of his kind of humour.
Aaron is telling this joke to me. Yeah. Do you know the joke about Moshe, who's dying and who calls his business partner Abi to his side? Mr. Schneider asked, and he began to tell the story about Moshe, who doesn't want to die before asking Abi forgiveness for certain wrongdoings. Do you remember when our first business went bust? That was my fault, Abi, and I am sorry. I embezzled money and falsified the accounts. I forgive you, Moshe, Abi reassures him. Moshe, and that night when that car got totaled, that was me, Abi. I wasn't wearing my glasses and I had too much to drink. Let's forget that, says Abi. That time that 100,000 francs went missing from the safe, it was me who took the money. I had to pay off my son's gambling debts. Ah, said Abi, don't worry about it, Moshe. I forgive you everything. Because, I'm the one who put that arsenic in your coffee. After telling the joke, Mr. Schneider cracked up laughing. Because he kept on looking at me expectantly, I pretended to laugh too.
Mazel Tov by J.S.Margot, published by Pushkin Press, is available from online outlets such as Waterstones, Foyles, Daunt Books, Hive and Amazon. To buy it from your local independent bookseller, you can find your nearest store by visiting www.booksellers.org.uk/bookshop search. This podcast is brought to you by BookBlast. For more bookishness between episodes, visit online journal The BookBlast Diary or find us on Twitter @BookBlast. Special thanks to sound editor Rupert Such, theme tune composer Edward Campbell, and to author J.S.Margot for taking the time to be interviewed. And thank you all for listening to this week's episode of the BookBlast podcast.